Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Ryan with Propelio. Today we have Christopher Ohlig again from the Ohlig Group. What we're going to be talking about today is the ethics of real estate. And what that would be is everything from the investment side to the agent broker side. But before I get into all that, I just want to do a quick light pitch for Propelio. Propelio.com, what we do, what we are, we provide investors with access to true MLS comps. If you're looking for off-market lead lists, we provide you with probate leads, heirship affidavit leads, pre-foreclosure leads, and that's all scrubbed daily versus maybe some other data providers that scrub their lists like once a month. So if you're dealing with pre-foreclosures, obviously speed's the key, so check out Propelio.com. Again, that's why we're here, that's what we do. Christopher Ohlig.
Yes, sir.
Who are you? What do you do? Why are you in real estate? And why are we talking about ethics?
So who I am, obviously you said my name's Chris Ohlig. I own Ohlig Group Realty. We're a real estate brokerage here in Dallas. We have about 34 agents between the two brokerages. One's a referral side, one's does the normal transaction side. I'm in real estate because it's just what I'm good at. I got into it at a young age. I started right out of high school. Me and a friend moved to California. I got in the mortgage business out there, and the company I worked for, we helped people cash out their properties and buy investment properties. So that's kind of what led me into the real estate side of things. When I moved back out here, when the market crashed out there, moved back out here and just kind of picked up in 2009, I think, doing traditional real estate, worked for a couple different brokerages before I started Ohlig Group Realty in 2013.
Okay.
So we're slowly growing. Our goal is not to grow too quickly, mostly because we want all of our agents to be highly educated. We want them to do what is right, which is kind of what we're talking about today. There's a lot of brokerages that will just take anybody. They don't train them properly. They don't provide the ethical background that a lot of them, need to succeed long term in this business. So that's one thing that we try to provide to our agents differently than a lot of these burn and turn brokerages.
So one of the things I love that you do is on two fronts. One, I think it's every Saturday, every Sunday, or every other Sunday.
Sandwich thing?
Yeah.
The sandwich, or you can go ahead and.
Well, you go for it.
Yeah.
That was my here go.
Yeah. So we started Volunteer North Dallas back in 2013, I believe. Basically, it was just a group of small friends getting together, 10 of us or so. We were making sandwiches every weekend for the homeless every Saturday. And then people started inviting their friends. More and more people started showing up to where we went to every Saturday, or we went to the first Saturday of every month. And we were having, 500 plus people show up. A bunch of smaller groups started because of that, to where we were making about 15,000 sandwiches per Saturday. They were going downtown to the Soup Mobile, where they would distribute the sandwiches throughout the week to the local homeless population.
So I bring that up, one, to show that he is an all-around good guy, or maybe he's trying to cover up and win back his karma. I don't know. But, just because this is, he's a good guy, he's doing those type of things. The other thing I like about you is you're not afraid to call people out, especially on Facebook. So if you don't follow or, add friend or follow, I don't know what your page is, but
I'm still at add friend.
Add friend. You're not at the, hey, I've got 17,000 whatever.
I think I'm close to the follow, but once I get to that point, I'll probably end up cutting back a lot of the
But my point being is that you're not afraid to call people out when they're doing shady stuff.
Right.
So we're talking about ethics today. Let's just go ahead and start with what is ethics, or at least ethics to you.
Yeah. So ethics in general is Greek for ethos, which is character. It's kind of it dictates or essentially encompasses how you behave. Really, when no one's looking, and obviously when people are looking too. But really, your character is defined by what you do when people aren't watching.
Right.
Who you really are. So in short, that's ethics. In this industry, it's how you treat people if you take advantage of people, doing what's right, not necessarily what's legal. Like you were saying earlier, is Just because it's legal, it doesn't mean it's right.
Right.
So that's ethics. We like to think that the laws are written to be ethical, but many times they haven't caught up to what's out there. So that's ethics in short.
Yeah, and a perfect example of the legal versus right is Daniel. He teaches a pre-foreclosure class, and in his class, he lays out 12 different strategies that you could assist somebody with their house. But he throws in there to all his students and everybody watching every single time he does classes, if you see a strategy where those people can keep their home and you don't tell them, screw you, you're a D-bag, a douchebag.
Right.
You should always try to help somebody, keep their house. That being said, in real estate, we do this to make money. We do this to make profit. So
Right.
don't make me. I'm not trying to sound like, it's not altruism. We're in this for money, but
Right.
you could still do it with ethics and do ethical things here.
Yeah, you can. There's a lot of money to go around,
Right.
by doing the right thing. And as realtors, there's a lot of people that don't like us. The public has their perception of us. But I remember learning from Bob Baker, he was on the Texas Broker Lawyer Committee. He helped write a lot of the contracts. All around good guy, and he taught us when you're going through to become a realtor, you have to take code of ethics class. Mm-hmm. And one of the main things that he likes to hammer out to us is we are the good people. We're the good guys. We're here, we're set up, and we're trained to protect the public against the unscrupulous scam artists, stuff like that. So we are the good people, and I think a lot of people forget that.
So when you see, say, and I'm not here to call anybody out, but when you see a brokerage or several agents or agents of a brokerage doing those things, like, what can you do other than just like, oh, those dirty rats?
So there's a process. We have to be very careful in doing stuff because the code of ethics does state that just by accusing someone of violating the code of ethics is considered unethical, which is kind of weird. But in short, if I see an agent doing something, I'll approach them. Whether it's online, we see a lot of people posting stuff online. I'll usually approach them via Messenger, let them know, hey, you probably should take that down. Hey, you should do this. If they ignore it or they tell me to piss off or whatever, then I'll go to their broker. Let the broker know, hey, your agent's doing this. You're probably not aware. You should be. If the broker doesn't take action, then we go to the local board, which is, in our case, CCAR, Collin County Association of Realtors. Some people are Metro Tex. There's different boards out here. And then at that point, it goes to TAR, which is the Texas Association of Realtors, trickles all the way up to NAR, National Association. You can file ethics complaints and stuff like that. It's a long process. I don't like having to do that. It's very rare that we have to because a lot of times it gets thrown out anyways. Because you don't get along with someone, it doesn't necessarily mean they're doing things unethical.
Right.
There's no rule that says we all have to get along.
Right.
So the process for me is start with the source and then take it up if need be.
So that's fine, Danny, for the real estate agent broker side, but what about, like, say, the investor side? Like, because I know you're part of a bunch of these groups. I know you work with a bunch of investors.
Yeah.
What can you do other than just saying so-and-so's an asshole?
So if I call people out, 9 times out of 10, they're going to block me. Especially with a lot of the investors, the wholesalers.
Right.
They don't like when I call them out on what they're doing. They'll immediately just block me. They'll tell me to F off, block. And then at that point, there's no communication.
Right.
I can't report them to CCAR. I can't report them to any local board because they're not members of them.
Right.
At that point, it's reporting it to TREC, which is the Texas Real Estate Commission, and let them take action. TREC is they're overseeing a very large state, so there's a lot of times they're not going to really dig into it, and a lot of these guys know that. They know that they can get away with it for a pretty extended period of time until someone like me goes away. So, yeah, I'll call them out. I usually get blocked. I'll get kicked out of the group, stuff like that.
Right. So as far as wholesaling goes, like, what, we talked about wholesalers in the law, or we haven't talked about it yet, but we're about to.
Right.
Like, what is it that some of these wholesalers are doing that maybe is against the law?
The biggest thing I see, so talking law and ethics,
Right.
Against the law, what a lot of them are doing is they're offering finder's fees and stuff like that, bird dog fees, where they're putting posts out there saying that they will pay John Smith $1,500 for any deal that John Smith sends them,
Right.
that they end up buying. That is illegal. State of Texas regulates that. And when you call some of these wholesalers out, their quickest response is, well, we don't have to follow those laws because we're not licensed.
Right.
Which is huge misconception. If you're a wholesaler watching this, please know that what you're doing is illegal. The person accepting the money is also breaking the law because they are then acting as a real estate agent that is unlicensed.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to be very careful when they're doing that, just because they can get in some pretty serious trouble for doing that.
So, and I know 99.9% of the wholesalers they're just thinking, okay, well, instead of a referral fee, can I just call it a marketing fee?
If it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, there's a good chance. I mean, again, if it goes to Trek and Trek looks into it, they're going to come down.
Right.
They're going to say, you can call it whatever you want.
Right.
But what you're providing is a fee for someone doing a service that they're unlicensed to do.
So other than that, other than just the referral, marketing, finding deal side of things, what other things are wholesalers doing that are ethically wrong or illegal? And I bring this up mainly just because I know Daniel had a post on Facebook that there was a fairly new
Wholesale law?
Yeah, it wasn't a wholesaler, but it was an agent from a certain group that was like, this is illegal. And everybody's like, no, it's not.
Yeah. I'd say most wholesalers work within the realm of legality. Mm-hmm. Some work outside of the ethical boundaries, and we all have different boundaries. There's no black and white ethic line.
Right.
It's a very, very gray area. So most wholesalers are doing things legally. There's nothing illegal about what they do at all. So anyone that thinks that, now there can be laws broken in the process. There's disclosure laws. Wholesalers do have to disclose to a buyer that they only have equitable interest and they're only selling that as a contract and stuff like that. But for the most part, I'd say most of them work within the realm of what's legal, as long as they're not offering fees and stuff like that.
Right. Speaking of disclosures, mainly just because it's a topic that comes up every once in a while. What are the disclosure, and I know you're not an attorney, but you are a knowledgeable broker. Disclosure when it comes to death in a home, whether it be old age, suicide, violent, accidental, what are the disclosure laws, ethics, guidelines, other than obviously you should probably say something, but I don't know how to ask that question.
Yeah. So every sale in the state of Texas, every property that's sold, unless it's inherited through a death, I just banged on the desk. Unless it's inherited through a death or it's a foreclosure situation, the seller has to provide what's known as the seller's disclosure notice. There's a standard by TREC, Texas Real Estate Commission, that puts one out, and then we have an additional one through TAR, and some brokerages such as Ebby Halliday have their own that's even more in depth. Those are the minimum requirements of what you're required to disclose to any potential buyers. So the seller's disclosure notice requires you to disclose any death unrelated to natural cause, unrelated to the condition of the property, or violent murder type stuff. So I don't know if I just said that right. So you have to disclose murders, and that's pretty much it, and anything pertaining to the property. So if someone dies because the floor gives out, they fall down to the first floor and they die, they have to disclose that. So suicides do not have to be disclosed. They should be. Really, any death should be disclosed. It's not required. It's better to disclose because there's nothing worse than you buying a property and 6 months later you're talking to your neighbor and they're like, oh, did it not bother you that John Smith, hung himself in the living room from the ceiling fan? It didn't have to be disclosed, but guess what? If you have religious beliefs that pertain to suicide and that kind of stuff, well, then your house is now haunted, or it can be a stigmatized property, and you can then sue the seller or the seller's agent if they're aware for non-disclosure, for emotional distress, stuff like that. I mean, you can say you couldn't sleep, you lost your job because of it. I mean, it can go pretty deep. So it's best to disclose all deaths, even if it is related to just somebody dying of natural causes.
So at the end of the day, and this is going to be an obvious statement, but at the end of the day, the reason you disclose things is to CYA, so to cover your rear, so you don't get sued later.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, no one's going to sue you up front for a lot of stuff. They're going to sue you later
Right.
when it does cause them distress. Now, I will say one thing you should not disclose if someone does die of AIDS, because you can be sued for that.
If you disclose it, you can be sued?
Correct. So if you tell a seller, hey, this person, or tell a buyer, this person died in the house with AIDS, even though you should disclose it, that's when you're crossing a boundary there that you shouldn't.
Seems like there's a lot, like, where's a good resource to find that? I mean, is it buried somewhere in Trek, buried somewhere in TAR? Like, where, like that, like that's interesting and that sounds accurate, but at the same time, I'm like, if over here you're telling me disclose, oh, but wait, you shouldn't disclose this. Like, how many other ones are like that? How many
Right.
other, like, mini exceptions are there?
That's really it. I mean, it boils, and you can find it all in Trek. If you just Google, death disclosure in Texas real estate, you're going to find some resources there, pretty easy to find.
Right.
There's websites out there that you can pay to find out if someone died in your house based off of whatever records they use. So there are places out there you can find it pretty easily. I'd say, I mean, there's only a few ways you can die: natural cause, suicide, murder, accident. So, I mean, all of them pretty much you're going to want to disclose. That the main exception is just the AIDS one.
So today we have Christopher Ohlig on, Ohlig Group. If you like what we're talking about, please like and share the video. It helps us out. Please go check out Ohlig Group Realty on their Facebook page. Give them a like, give them a review. Give us a review. We love happy thoughts and happy 5 stars. Woohoo! But again, go to your groups, share this around, get this out there. We do this every single day for free for you, for the knowledge. Again, if you need MLS comps, you need off-market leads, check out Propelio.com. That's what we do. That's our bread and butter. And everything we do here on the stage is just for fun and for giving you knowledge. So we have a bunch of topics here, like everything that we're on here. So let's just go down the list and of things that we can talk about.
You would talk about the, here, let me log in here. Because one of the things that we were talking about earlier is a lot of the general public, they don't necessarily know the difference between...
This is the longest password I've ever seen in my life.
I got to keep people out of my stuff. It is very long.
Oh, by the way, if you have questions, please drop them in the comment section and we'll get to them here shortly.
All right, there we go. So one of the things that a lot of people don't know is the difference between a licensed salesperson, a realtor, and a broker.
Right.
Because they hear those terms thrown around all the time, they don't necessarily know the difference. So can we cover that?
Please.
Okay. So I figured we get as much information out there as possible.
That'll work. We like it.
So licensed salesperson is someone that's licensed in the state to sell real estate. In order to do so, they have to take 180 hours of education, which is not a lot. I mean, to become a licensed hairstylist, I think you need like a couple thousand. So it's our bar is set pretty low, which I would like to see changed. I think a lot of people would. Some lobbies against it, but that's a totally different subject. But a licensed salesperson has to take 180 hours. They have to get fingerprinted by Texas DPS because they are going into properties and stuff like that. They have to pass a moral determination, like a background check, to make sure that they're morally sound, that they're not going to go out just because they passed a test, that they're not going to go out and commit some crimes. And then they have to obviously pass a real estate test. Mm-hmm. That then issues them a license to practice real estate in the state of Texas. In order to actually practice, they have to then become sponsored by a broker. So a broker has done that, plus they've been licensed for 4 years. They've done additional education, they've taken an additional test, they've done a certain number of transactions. So they basically have to graduate to a broker stage in order to sponsor people. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more involved, but in a nutshell, that's kind of it. So,
Is the only difference between the licensed practitioner and an agent is the agent is sponsored?
yes, so you can be licensed and not practice real estate. You can just have a license just sitting there. Most people, I don't know why they would do that unless they've taken their test, they've passed it, and they just haven't found a broker yet to sponsor them. But yes, so the difference is you have a licensed salesperson that's non-active, and then an active salesperson that's sponsored by a broker.
So, not to get like conflicting with you or battle you at all.
Yeah.
But just because I remember years ago, I went to some of those courses just for my knowledge. I never wanted to be an agent, but I just wanted to get the knowledge.
Yeah.
And I went to 2 or 3 classes, and literally, and I'm not gonna say who the classes went through, but it was you had to sit through those hours. But the presenter was like, "Here's the knowledge." You read it straight from the book. Said, "Here is the test we're about to do.
Right.
Here are all the answers.
Yep.
Take a second, and then we're about to take the quiz to pass you on this segment."
Right.
So I guess it goes back to what you were just saying, how you would like the standards to change because it's not very high, but even the standards that are already set, I mean, from my experience of actually going through, and again, I'm not an agent, I haven't gone through the full course, but just that one portion, I'm like, really? Come on now.
So you have the classes. I took mine in college. There's a lot of real estate schools in the Metroplex. There's online classes you can take. I think most of them now are proctored, so they're actually watching you take the course if you're not sitting in the classroom. For anyone thinking about getting licensed, I would recommend doing it in a classroom setting. You can ask questions. You can be interactive. You meet people. Those are the people that you're probably going to be working with in the future. So the classroom settings are always better. When you're actually taking the classes, they are kind of a joke. They are giving you the answers to the quizzes and stuff like that. Just to get the classwork done is pretty easy. You still have to take a test that is proctored. They have cameras watching you. It is difficult. I'd say, I don't know what the statistics are. It's probably 60% or so of, maybe even higher, of the people that take the test usually don't pass the first time. I've known people that have taken it 6 times and then they give up. After 3 times, you have to take some additional education and stuff like that. So even though the classrooms or the classes are relatively easy, the test is not.
Okay.
So it does weed some people out at that point.
So it's almost like the classes are there because they're selling training.
Correct.
And they want you to feel like you're getting stuff out of it. But the reality is the test itself is hard.
Yeah. These, and not to say that they're all bad, but a lot of these, real estate schools, they're for-profit entities.
Of course, yeah.
They're there to. There's a lot of people that want to get into real estate. They're going to capitalize on that. They're going to give them the minimum education required, but they might not give them the information they need to really pass the test.
So, since we're talking about ethics, like, where does that? I mean, because again, if you're selling the education, and you think, hey, you've gone through the X amount of courses, the 180. Hey, you're ready to take this test. And then they go and they're like, holy crap, I didn't know any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't it kind of like ethically like egg on their face type?
I mean, it's just like any college, really. I mean, any college, I can go sign up to take classes at, Collin College or, wherever. And just because I have the college classes, it doesn't mean I'm guaranteed a job.
Right.
And it's the same with this. Just because you finish the classes, you might not pass the test. If you do pass the test, you still have to find someone to sponsor you. Brokers like me are not just taking people on. We're vetting people. We want to know that they're going to be good for us, for the community. They're trainable, stuff like that. So you still have to find someone to sponsor you. So you're not guaranteed a job. Even if you do find someone to sponsor you, you're not guaranteed any success. You still have to earn that.
So on that note, if I'm considering being an agent, should I interview brokers before I go through the course, or is that skipping ahead? Because as a broker, do you want Joe Smith or Sally Smith coming in and saying, hey, I'm thinking about becoming an agent, and you're like, cool, well, you're just wasting my time until you're actually ready to be an agent?
Yeah, so people will come to us and do that. Hey, I'm thinking of getting my license. Where do I start? We're happy to guide them. We have everything pre-written. So if someone does come to us saying that, we send them the information they need step by step. here's where you're going to go. You're going to sign up for these classes. Here's the minimum classes required. Here's approximately what it costs. Here's how long it's going to take you. After you complete that, here's what you do, here's what you do, here's what you do. That alone weeds people out, because if they won't even, once they look at that, they're like, oh, wow, that's a lot of stuff. They're going to fail in real estate. And it can be expensive. There is a cost to getting into real estate. It's not a lot, but there is a cost involved, and that will weed people out too. We don't want that to be a deterrent, but it sometimes is, because there are some good people that would be great in this industry. They just don't have the resources financially to get started. There are some brokers that I believe will kind of pay for you to get licensed and stuff. I don't know if it's technically legal. I know it does ask when you're accepting sponsorship if the broker, I believe, paid for stuff, and I don't know if he answered yes if it deters anything. So I don't know the rules on that, but there are some brokers, I believe, that will pay for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it sounds like we could do a whole 2-hour segment on that process, but I don't want to go too far that rabbit hole. So let's redirect and let's target at Zillow.
Okay.
One thing,
Well, I want to go back real fast.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So you have the real estate agent, you have the broker, and then you have a realtor. So a lot of people think that a real estate agent and a realtor are the same thing, which a realtor is a step up. So once you're licensed, you can practice real estate in the state of Texas, but you don't have access to the MLS and stuff like that. You also have to take a code of ethics class. The difference between a real estate agent and a realtor is mostly that ethics. The ethics class they take essentially teaches them how to be ethical. Everyone kind of knows, but it teaches you what you're required to do to be a realtor, to be ethical. You have to take some MLS classes and stuff like that. But the biggest thing is the ethics aspect of it. Like I said, the realtors are the good people. So,
and the agents are not?
Usually if an agent, I think, doesn't want to become a realtor, there's probably something going on there that they're not wanting to agree to. Because really that's the only difference. I mean, there's some small fees and stuff associated, but the biggest difference is you're agreeing to abide by a code of ethics.
So, and I had no idea there was a difference between agents and realtors.
Yeah.
Because I'm not an agent, a realtor, or a broker.
And the general public doesn't know that.
Right.
So the general public, if they're interviewing someone to sell their house, and someone they should ask, are you just an agent or are you a realtor?
Right.
Because if that person is just an agent, they don't have a way to put it in the MLS. They don't have any ethics that they're abiding by, where a realtor is required to do all that. And if they violate those in any way, then another agent can come forward, file a complaint against the board, and they can lose their realtor designation, and they get booted down, to just being a real estate agent.
So before getting into Zillow, just since we're still talking about the agents and realtors and brokers, what about the inherent conflict of being a buyer's agent and a seller's agent, where you're the singular person on both sides of the transaction?
So state of Texas kind of says you can't do that.
Okay.
Now at a broker level you can. It's timed out there. At a broker level you can. So the state of Texas has what's called intermediary.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
State of Texas has what's called intermediary. So let's say I am there's an entire class to get your license that covers law of agency,
right?
Which is essentially what I'll try to cover in about 30 seconds. But you have a buyer's agent, you have a seller's agent. And let's say I am brokerage A has this listing with this seller. And one of the agents in that office says, I want to represent my buyer to buy that property that's listed by my brokerage. At that point, you have what's known as intermediary, where the brokerage has to assign, it's called with assignments, intermediary with assignments. The brokerage or the broker assigns two agents, agent to represent seller, agent to represent buyer, to conduct the transaction. Both the buyer and the seller have to agree to this in writing, and they have to sign off on everything, saying that two people within the same brokerage are going to represent them on a singular sale that is essentially held by the brokerage. The reason for that is because the seller's agent has a fiduciary duty to represent the seller and get the highest price. Buyer's agent is trying to get the lowest price, or whatever the case may be. You can't do that if you're representing both parties. So they're treated as two separate parties
Right.
in that case. So that's intermediary. That's how Texas handles it. If you don't, and like say I represent the seller and a buyer comes to me and I pretend to represent that buyer, I'm then creating what's called undisclosed dual agency. I'm representing both parties undisclosed, which is illegal. All of that can be determined, in order to know how you're represented, any agent upon substantive conversation about real estate. So if you just call me on the phone to ask, what's the price on 123 Elm Street, that's not required. But if we're having a conversation about real estate, we're going to be going through the process of either selling a house or buying a house. We have to provide what's known as information about brokerage services. It's a one-page document. It's regulated by TREC. You can't alter it in any way. And it states your options for representation. If you're represented as a buyer, represented as a seller, or intermediary. At the bottom, they initial it, acknowledging they've received it. And it also has to be listed on any real estate website that's held by someone in the state of Texas, and also in any email signature. So that has to be present in all of those. And it's to make sure that the consumer is aware of their options. So, because they might elect to not be represented. They might say, I want to be represented, but this person has this listing,
Right.
So they need to determine their personal choices for that.
I had a thought there, and I'm losing it. But again, though, so if you're listing agent or broker on 123 Elm Street, and I'm a buyer, and I call you up and like, hey, how much is it? You say it's XYZ, but then we start talking. You have to send me a piece of paper that says, hey, what do you want to do here? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, there's no way to really. I mean, we're going to disclose the relationship right away.
I'm the seller's agent.
Yeah, just so you know, I am representing the seller in this situation. Are you working with an agent? One of the first things that we teach our agents, and everyone should teach their agents to ask, is, are you an agent? Are you represented by an agent, or are you an attorney? Because in any of those cases, you can only have limited dialogue if they say yes to those.
Why is that?
Because if at that point you're giving information to somebody else's client, and if they say, yes, I'm an agent, okay, well then you can give some information without giving, because at that point you're not representing them and stuff like that.
Because it's all about the fiduciary responsibility to your party.
Correct.
And if you say, oh, well, that light bulb is probably going to go out next week or something like that, and they'll be like, oh, well, let's offer them $1,000 less.
Correct. And I had to be careful in the way I was wording that, because we get calls for other people's listings. So there are times where we tell people, hey, just so you know, they'll call from Zillow. We're premier agents on there. People will see, 123 Elm Street, that we don't represent the seller, but we're listed as an agent that they can contact to view that property. So they'll call our office or cell phone. We let them know we don't represent that. That is listed by XYZ brokerage, but we're more than happy to show it to you. In those situations, we can give them more information because we don't represent, we have no fiduciary duty to that seller. So I was trying to be careful of how I worded it a minute ago.
Well, speaking of Zillow, because I know Zillow, it's actually comical in the real estate investor world as well, because a lot of wholesalers will be like, hey, well, 123 Elm Street is worth $275,000 ARV. Yeah. Zillow told me.
Yeah.
So what are the A, what is your opinion of Zillow? And B, well, let's just start with that. What's your opinion of Zillow?
They're the elephant in the room. It's, if you can't beat them, join them. They're a huge entity. They now own Trulia. I believe there's talks of them buying Realtor.com. And just so everyone else knows, Realtor.com is not owned by the Realtor Association. I believe Rupert Murdoch or his holding companies own it. It's a third-party website.
Yeah, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
I thought they were a part of it.
It's essentially, it's more accurate, but it's still similar to Zillow and Trulia. They do get direct feed. Zillow also receives feed from our MLS. Some MLSs elect not to provide the feed. Some brokerages can allow not to provide the feed. But at the end of the day, the consumer's looking there. That's where they go to find stuff. So we're going to put our listings on there because otherwise we're not maximizing the viewability of that property to the consumers,
Right.
which is our obligation.
Right.
So my opinion on Zillow is what they're doing works. So it's really hard to fight. People trust it, and it's hard to say, oh, you shouldn't trust that, because that's where they're going to go. We're premier members on there. By doing so, we get leads from it. We get all of our own listings leads, which is a big deal for us. We'll get leads from other brokerages, other agents, listings that aren't premier members. So there is some advantage to it. In terms of their Zestimate, that their value that they put on there, it's guess. It's a guess of what that value is, and it's generally not accurate. Reason being, in some states, it's pretty accurate. You go to California, it's pretty accurate. Here, Texas is a non-disclosure state, which means sales prices are not disclosed. So if you sell your house, nobody ever knows what that value is. The county's going to send you a document saying, hey, you just sold your house, please provide us with the value. They're going to send it to both you and the buyer, or both parties. You're not required by any law to provide that information. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go to the state. It doesn't go anywhere. The only people that have access to sold data is a realtor. We're the only ones with true access to the MLS. We can provide MLS listings and access to our IDX systems to the general public, but it's not going to have any sold information. The only way to truly have that is to be a realtor. So Zillow is not a realtor. They're not a real estate brokerage yet. So they don't have true access to sold data. So they're basically coming up with their estimate of value off of recorded mortgage information. So they can see, okay, well, this mortgage was recorded, it was an FHA mortgage, so we're going to assume 3.5% down, and it was recorded for $200,000. So we're going to assume the sales price was $207,000. That's kind of where they're coming up with that data. Mm-hmm. But that FHA buyer might not have put 3.5% down.
Sorry.
They might have put 20% down, and they went FHA because their credit score was lower. Mm-hmm. It's also taking a valuation based off of similar properties. But if someone pays cash for a property and that sales price is never disclosed even to the MLS, it's showing as zero mortgage to the county, mm-hmm. So $0 sales price in theory. And they're factoring that in, which is really messing with the valuations.
So real quick before I do move on, Propelio is not a Zillow. Propelio does get there because it is a broker's website. We have access to all that information because it is an IDX feed.
Right.
Speaking of Zillow, though, do you ever see, because with the internet, with the evolution of technology, and people doing more FSBOs, for sale by owners, through Craigslist, through Zillows, do you see a service like Zillow having an impact on the use of realtors and brokers?
I don't think so. I think people will go that direction, but once they realize what they're not getting in terms of like representation and stuff like that, a lot of times they're going to come back to a trusted source. They're going to come back to a realtor. Do we charge for our services? Absolutely. Is Zillow free? Absolutely. But if you were a seller trying to sell your house for sale by owner and you thought all you got to do is put it on Zillow, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. That's going to generate a buyer, but then what? Do you know what paperwork you have to provide? Right. Do you know that you have to provide a seller's disclosure notice? Do you know that you have to disclose that death in the property? If not, guess what? There's a good chance you're going to get sued. And there's a lot of agents and people out there that target those FSBOs for that very reason. We have treble damage in Texas, 3 times the value of a property, or the damages. So if you're a FSBO, you're selling your house for sale by owner by putting it on Zillow, me, a very educated investor, knows the laws, comes to you, buys your property, and you don't go through proper disclosure, I'm going to come after you for more money. Is it right? Maybe not. because you're then targeting uneducated people. Is it legal? Absolutely.
And that goes back to the whole ethics of.
Goes back to
That's
ethics.
kind of shitty.
Yeah, it is, but at the same time, they shouldn't be selling their house if they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
Now, if you're an experienced person, you know what you're doing. You've sold 1,000 homes. Maybe you were licensed before for 20 years. Now you got out of it. You're selling your house. You want to list it on Zillow. So be it. You know, if you have access to the forms, and a lot of the forms are available on Trek on the website. You can't use TAR. You can't use Realtor forms,
Right.
unless you're a Realtor. But there are forms on Trek. They're basic, but you can use those to sell your house.
And I think that's one thing as an investor that at least I forget is, because every once in a while, I throw my subtle jabs at, well, what do you need a realtor for?
Right.
But at the same time, it's because I've looked at hundreds of contracts. I've filled out hundreds, whatever. So it's like, again, that homeowner who's doesn't know you can go to Trek and download a 1-to-4 and know that, pre-1978, I need a lead-based paint.
Yeah.
So again, if I'm doing this, I get that I would probably forget that, most people don't have that.
Yeah, and it even goes back, you could have sold 10 houses in the last 10 years, but if you haven't sold a house in the last 6 months, laws change. Laws change all the time. In fact, new contracts went into place, did it say the 12th? Today?
12th,
yeah. Today, the Texas Real Estate Commission, they meet to decide whether they're going to adopt the new contracts or not. And from the way it looks, they will.
And as an investor, where do I get the updated contracts? Just Trek?
Yep. You can go to Trek. They'll have usually a link. You can search through their website, look for updated forms. So new contracts will be on Trek probably today or tomorrow. TAR already released a whole new section of things on February 1st. A lot of realtors don't know that.
But as a non-realtor, I'm not allowed to use those.
Correct.
What about scams within Zillow?
That is probably the biggest problem. If someone wants to sell their house on there, so be it. If someone wants to use their Zestimate to come up with a value, that's fine too. What people really need to be concerned about is the number of scams on there. If you're a scammer watching this, I'm going to teach you some tricks. Hopefully you don't go and use them. But
don't use this as a go-to.
Don't use this as a training. But what's happening is, say I'm selling my house, or I'm an agent. I'm listing a house at 123 Elm Street for sale. And I put a combination box on that door. It's a vacant house. Someone calls me, maybe it's an agent or somebody, they want to view the property, or assuming it's an agent, they call me, they want to see the property, I give them the combination, they go view the property. Somehow, somewhere in that process, a scammer picks up that combination. They then go to Zillow, they take all the pictures from the internet, and they take the property description, and they list that property on Zillow for rent for $1,500 a month. Let's say normally it would rent for $3,000 a month. It looks like a steal. They get all these people contacting them, hey, I want to rent this property. So they have Google Voice numbers set up, certain numbers, when they call in, they know exactly who they're pretending to be. Hey, this is Chris. They're pretending to be us. Hey, I saw this house on Zillow for rent. Yeah, go ahead and take a look. I'm out of town right now. Here's the combination, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me know what you think. They go, they look at the house. It's vacant, so they're not bothering anyone. They like the house. They reply back to this email or whatever, which are just burner emails. Hey, I like the property, I want to apply. Here's the application. These people are then filling out applications with first name, last name, birth date, social security numbers, kids' names, kids' birthdays, addresses, previous addresses. They're literally giving their information to these scammers. These scammers are then taking that information, selling it, doing whatever they're doing with
Identity theft.
Yep. And then they're saying, okay, great. Well, we went ahead and approved you. They're not running credit or anything. We went ahead and approved you. All you got to do is pay the security deposit of $1,500, or the first month's rent, $1,500. Security deposit, $500. You can go ahead and take that to Western Union, whatever, and then feel free to take the key out of the lockbox, and you're good to go.
And move in.
And people move in, and they catch people that are really desperate, looking for places quick.
Right.
I'm looking to move in this weekend. These people then move into properties. They've wired this money out, or Western Union it out to wherever, untraceable pretty much at that point. They move into a property. 3 or 4 days later, or a week later, or 2 weeks later, John Smith and his family are moving in because they bought that house because it was only for sale. Well, then now these people have to get evicted, and they just lost $2,000 or more, and there's nothing they can do about it.
So on that, that's shitty.
Yeah.
But B, if I'm the owner and I'm selling, do I have now? I've got these squatters in there because in my mind they're squatters.
Right.
I know in their mind they think they paid. Like they're gonna be like, no, we paid, but now don't I have to go through the whole process of eviction and kicking them out?
Yeah.
Or what's? I mean, I know that's a lawyer speak, sheriff speak. There's all this entanglement of just.
Yeah, the process for getting
Crap.
people out, I'm assuming you have to go through a formal eviction because they did take possession. If that happens to you, contact a real estate attorney.
Right. Because in that example, it was already sold and somebody's about to move in. So on their point, they're like, well, this is my home.
Yeah.
And these guys are like, I'm renting it. So the people that, because if I just sold it, I get that it's not my place to evict anybody because it's not my house anymore.
Right.
But at the same time, now they could sue me because they don't have a house, but it wasn't my fault there's somebody in there. So it's just shit on everyone.
Yeah, I mean, we usually at that point we walk away. We push it to someone else. Hey, contact this attorney to
Right.
handle that. So I don't know what it looks like on that back end.
Right.
I know we've had people come to us after the fact saying, I got scammed. It happens probably every week. Someone calls us, hey, I need a property, I got scammed. And, oh, where'd you get scammed? Zillow, I did this. Oh, did they say they were on a mission and they were out of town and they were at a funeral, whatever? Yeah, it's
That's
common.
crazy.
Yeah.
I've heard of, in my mind, Zillow is a scam in the sense that you don't have accurate numbers with
Right.
a Z estimate. But that aspect of it is like, holy crap, that would suck.
I mean, even if you look at their website, there's huge disclaimers all over it that say, do not wire money, be aware of scams. I mean, if you go to Zillow, like it's all over the place. But what do people do? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
accept.
not going to get scammed.
It's not my fault.
Yeah, it's not going to happen to me. But it happens a lot. And what's really frustrating is we have to deal with the cleanup because that scammer was pretending to be us, for example.
Right.
So then somebody that's being kicked out of their house then calls us because they end up finding our actual office number or cell phone
And you're
number.
like, it wasn't us.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't care. You owe us money. It's like,
Yes, people will come back saying, well, I talked to Chris Ohlig. I'm Chris Ohlig. You have not talked to me. I don't know who you are. I don't know anything. What email were you communicating with? Here's the email address. That's not our email. There's IP addresses and stuff.
Right.
They mirror things. There's all sorts of ways around it. But yeah, people come to us saying, well, I paid you guys. You haven't paid us a dime. I've never seen your name before.
right.
That is a problem. It's a burden on realtors everywhere.
It seems like there's egg on everybody's face because now if you've got somebody who, like myself, if I get screwed, I want to burn your house down, figuratively, not literally. I'm not condoning anybody to perform any kind of violent action, but I'm better Bureau of Business. I'm blasting you all over Facebook groups. I'm using every network opportunity to talk bad about you.
Yep.
Speaking of which, if you need a title company, don't go to that certain someone. You know who I'm talking about. But anyway, you use every opportunity to throw shade, as the kiddies would say,
Yeah.
on that particular business. So how do you prevent that situation other than just using a realtor or not trusting Zillow?
Yeah, we've tried approaching the boards that when we put a picture on the MLS, we're not allowed to watermark them at all. So anyone can just steal those pictures, and that's become a problem. We've talked to the board about possibly allowing some watermark to some degree. We don't know if that's really going to help. The best thing we can do is educate the public. That's it. We can, as realtors, we have a duty to the public. And we need to be out there and do a better job of informing people of the types of scams that do occur so that we can basically nip it in the bud. Because otherwise it's going to continue to happen and it's going to come back. Again, people are going to come back to us saying, your fault, when it's not.
So, I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that. Maybe I'm just nicer and I don't think pessimistically and I'm not paranoid because I never even thought about that because now that you brought it up, I'm like, oh, well, then I could take that, throw it on Craigslist. I could take that. And
They're everywhere.
All over the place.
And we can reach out to Zillow if we know our listing's been scammed. We can reach out to Zillow or Trulia or whoever and say, hey, just so you know, this property is not for rent. It's not our property. They'll remove it there, but it's going to show up on hot pads and Craigslist and for rent by owner and thousands of other websites. I mean, these people are they're selling this information, they're selling these pictures. It's almost impossible to get it removed from the internet. Once it's on the internet, it's there. And we get calls for months on these properties that were never for rent.
Right.
And to one step further on the squatter situation, you guys might have heard recently about those serial squatters.
No, I have not. No.
I mean, it was a big news thing here in Dallas. What they were doing was they were living in properties, they were moving into the properties, and then they would never pay rent. And they know the laws inside and out. So they were essentially living in houses for years at a time or months at a time until the eviction process would go through. They kept putting Liz pendants and stuff on the property to delay all these issues. And they were living in these properties for free within the same neighborhood. I mean, it was really bad. They came across my desk recently, and I won't use their names just for legal purposes, but if you all want to try to figure out who they are. What they were doing is getting pre-approval letters from lenders, and they were offering to buy properties. So we were representing them, and we didn't know any of this. And this was before the whole squatter thing came to the fruition. They were trying to buy properties, but saying, because we have to get our credit up to this, we need a 90-day close, but we need to move into it, in the next 2 weeks. So they were trying to do buyer leasebacks, buyer temporary leases.
Right.
So they'd move into the property, but they would never close on it. In theory, we never got to that point. They would never close on it, file as pendants so that people couldn't sell it. They were targeting vacant homes. They were targeting out-of-town sellers, homes that were on the market for a long period of time. So if you're watching this and you have somebody that's making an offer on your property, your listing, and they sound like they fit that mold, you report them, because it might be these people. We don't know where they went. There's a good chance they're targeting people right now in the same. They've been in this North Dallas area for 10 years doing this or longer.
I'll say any kind of leaseback makes me nervous. Like a buyer leaseback, I'm like, hell no.
Yeah, we obviously it's up to the sellers
Right.
to agree to do stuff. We're going to advise them not to.
So if you do have questions, if you do have comments, please drop them in below. If you have likes and shares, please give us some likes. Please give us some shares. We love that you're watching. Before we get to those questions, though, what do you think the number one complaint is towards like TAR and the regulating body of real estate in Texas?
I think we put it in here.
There you go.
I forgot what it
I'll
was.
let you read it.
Yeah.
We came prepared.
TAR says the number one complaint that they get concerns advertising violations, such as team names, presenting themselves as a broker, or responsible for brokerage operations without a broker's license, doctoring photos, which you can't do, failing to identify oneself as a licensee when inquiring about a property, bait and switch type ads, fabricating listing descriptions, advertising another broker's listing as your own, who the agent works for, intermediary, stuff like that. Really just...
What does that mean? Dumb that down for people like myself.
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there, agents or agents, that you'll see, like we are Ohlig Group Realty. Before I was the Ohlig Group, so a lot of people still interchange those. The Texas requires you to file any team name with TREC. You should also file it with, I guess, Secretary of State or whoever handles, fictitious business names, or you're doing business as names. But TREC requires you to file team names with them, so that someone can always go to TREC and identify if they see John Smith listings or whatever the team name is, that they can go to TREC, search for that name, and find out who is behind it. The problem is a lot of people don't file that, or they're representing themselves. They're making it seem as if they're a broker. So for using the term realty in a name is representing yourself as a brokerage.
Right.
So if you see John Smith Realty, you're going to assume, oh, John Smith is a real estate company and John Smith is a broker. John Smith Realty might be Mike Williams, and he might be just a license for another broker. There's a lot of confusion to the public in that sense. I know they're talking about changing some things in terms of like homes, calling it, Chris Ohlig Homes. I'm not the seller. That's not my house. I'm not the builder. I don't own these properties. So using the word homes can also, deceive the public into thinking that you're the owner, you're the seller, you're the builder, when really you're just an agent. People need to be very careful with team names and what they're calling themselves, because there are laws on the books for this, and they just changed them, I think October 1st or October 15th. Someone will probably correct that. But within the last few months on what teams are required to disclose.
So basically what I'm hearing is anytime you're doing anything of your business is make sure you're not trying to deceive somebody or intentionally deceive somebody, or maybe unintentionally deceiving. Make sure you have all your disclosures, and just ultimately not be.
Don't be shady.
Don't be shady. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some good examples of where you saw something that was legal but unethical, as whatever?
Oh, where do I start?
If you didn't see that on camera, he just had this very slight smile of his brain processing what he should or should not talk about on air.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things out there. In terms of like ethics, and I'm not throwing wholesalers on the bus, because like I said, a lot of them do work within the laws, but some of the stuff that they say to people to get them to sell their house, to me, is unethical. Mm-hmm. A lot of agents don't realize this, so I'm just going to go ahead and teach y'all something. If you as an agent are called on a listing appointment to represent the seller, or they say, hey, can you come take a look at my house, I'm thinking of selling it, you go to that listing appointment and you say, hey, we can go ahead and list this, but I also have someone that will buy it, and let's say you purchase it, or you're the purchaser, and you're purchasing it for, let's say, $200,000, and it's worth $300,000. That seller better know what that house is worth when they're selling it to you. And the law actually says, most of y'all don't know this, that you have to have comps provided to that seller, and they have to sign that, and you have to retain that record showing that you provided the seller accurate sales price information, or actual value information. And if they still agree to sell it to you for that $100,000 discount or whatever, you better have record of that. Mm-hmm. A lot of agents don't realize that that's even a law. Wholesalers don't have to do that. Agents do, because they're being called upon as a real estate professional.
Right, and the fiduciary responsible to the.
They're technically not fiduciary. They're not. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're technically not having to. They're not fiduciary at that point,
because they're representing the buyer.
They're representing nobody at that point.
Oh, okay.
That seller is just a customer. It's not until they sign a listing agreement where they're agreeing to represent that party.
So in that situation, would they be an intermediary?
No, they're just nobody at that point.
Okay.
So when they go to the seller to talk to them about selling their house, the seller is a customer. It's not until the listing agreement's signed that they become a client. Mm-hmm. Once they become a client, they then have a fiduciary responsibility to that person.
Excellent. Well, it looks like Daniel's over here. Let's see what he's got for us.
Hey, thank you for coming on here. We've got quite a few questions in here. Some of them have been answered already in the comments, but I've got a few here that I think would be great for you. I've got a question from Hernando that says, what should a licensed inactive agent disclose when wholesaling a deal with a buyer or seller?
What should a licensed inactive agent? I believe that they would still have to disclose that they're a licensed agent, whether they're active or not. At least in the 1 to 4, the residential contract, there's a section on the first page, paragraph 4, I believe, that does ask them to disclose any relationship to a licensed agent, whether it's a relative or themselves. So they need to make very clear of who they are. I would also recommend adopting some sort of page saying, and have an attorney write it, saying that you are a licensed agent. Maybe you're not, practicing with a brokerage, but you are a licensed agent, and you have full capability of taking advantage of somebody.
I've got another question here from the same person that asks, do you have to file an LLC with Trek if you are an agent?
No. If you're an agent, you're working for either a broker, which could be an individual broker. So like me, I am a broker. So I am Chris Ohlig, broker, license number 0591753. But I also have an LLC or a couple LLCs that are filed as brokerages, where I am the broker of those brokerages.
What was that number again so I can go to Zillow?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
0591753. And then I have my brokerage license number, which is its own entity in and of itself. It's corporation brokerage, where I'm the broker of. Now, you don't have to file an LLC, and you can't actually file an LLC unless you are a brokerage in the state of Texas, because in order to have that, you have to have a broker assigned to it, or if you own less than, I think, 10%, you have to have there's certain requirements on E&O insurance and stuff like that.
I'm glad you pointed out, because in that the whole point of it is so if you're an agent or a realtor, you're under the umbrella of protection
From the broker, correct. An LLC is not going to. Now you can file an LLC. You could be John Smith and file, John Smith LLC.
Right.
You can't register that as a licensed entity.
Right. Mr. Moore?
I've got another great question here, and that is, if I am wholesaling a property as a licensed real estate agent, can I take a wholesale property to a licensed real estate agent and have that licensed real estate agent list my wholesale property on the MLS?
Good question.
Say that one more time.
Let's say I'm a wholesaler and I have a contract that I've executed with a buyer or a seller, and I'm looking to assign that contract or double close that contract. Can I take that contract that I have secured to a licensed agent and market that contract on the MLS?
I believe you can sell the contract, but you cannot list in the MLS. MLS actually says that you can't list the property unless you are the owner on tax records.
Okay.
So,
Good answer.
Answer the question?
Yep.
Yeah, you have to be. Now, keep in mind the MLS is realtor based. It's owned by the Realtor Association, where TREC is something totally different. That's the state of Texas. So, in order to list in the MLS, Netris, which is who we use here in Dallas, North Texas Real Estate Information Systems, they regulate and they have their own rules onto how you can list stuff, who can list things. You have to have a listing agreement with the seller of the property, and in order to be the seller of the property, to list the to put it in MLS, you have to be tax records. You can't sell. You can't sell just the contract.
Okay. I've got another question here from Daniel Trinidad, and it's lost in my newsfeed now, but he was essentially asking if I'm marketing to foreclosures in the state of Texas, are there any laws that I need to be following or anything that I need to be concerned about? Because other states in the United States do have laws against foreclosure marketing and specialists, et cetera.
I mean, I'd say if you're marketing to foreclosures, if you want to mail stuff to them, that's fine. Just be very careful who you're calling, because there are a lot of people on the do not call list, and if you're calling those people and harassing them, they can file harassment claims. If nothing else, I think it's a couple $1,000 fine for calling people that are on that do not call list. So be sure to scrub that.
And I'll throw in, neither one of us are attorneys. And
Yes.
if you're concerned about the law, maybe consult an attorney.
Correct. Yep.
Should
have started with that.
Yeah. And that's our daily disclosure here at Propelio.
Yeah.
I am not an attorney. On this little list here, we were talking about ethics, the law, but also what about maybe cheapest isn't always the best. What's the difference between how did you word it? The
Discount brokerages.
a discount brokerage versus someone who's just, hey, this is a normal fee.
Yeah, so again, like if say you're an investor and you're buying and selling a ton of properties, and you just need you have your own photographer.
Just need MLS.
You just need MLS. I mean, hey, you can pay someone to put in MLS. There's really nothing wrong with that. If you're a traditional seller, maybe you haven't sold a house in a long time, the difference between using a professional agent and a non-professional agent is going to be drastically different. Professional pictures versus cell phone pictures.
Right.
Property descriptions properly written versus check it out. So even the MLS asks for the directions to the property. See GPS. I mean, versus actually written out directions for people that maybe their GPS is down, whatever the case may be. I'll look at the directions all the time because I'm like, I don't think that's right, or I just want to get an idea of where it is. knowing the laws. A part-time maybe discount agent probably they're not up to date on all the laws. They could end up getting the seller in trouble. And I always use the analogy of, are you familiar with Spirit Airlines? Can we say Spirit Airlines?
You can say anything you want.
Okay, good. Are you familiar?
Yeah, I've been on them once.
Okay. They're a discount,
Yeah.
airline that you basically pay for all sorts of, you pay along the way.
Yeah.
Versus like, let's say American Airlines, a better airline, more expensive.
Right.
If you got to fly from LA to New York, right? Your life is very important. Would you rather fly on an airplane that has a 50% chance of getting you there alive? Because it's cheap, but they only do maintenance on the plane every 10 flights. They don't always check the gas because they just can't afford the maintenance on that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Or would you rather pay a little bit extra, maybe even twice as much, $250 to $500, difference? Would you rather pay twice as much to guarantee that you get to New York alive, on time, safely?
Right.
That's probably pretty important. The way you treat your life as being that valuable is the way you should treat like the sale of the property. That's probably the largest thing you're ever going to sell in your life. You should treat that transaction as the way you would treat your life. Pay a little bit extra for the better quality of it. It's going to be smooth. It's going to be easy. It's going to guarantee you get there.
Speaking of Spirit Airlines, it's always funny because I've only been on them once, and I was doing a consulting gig. And
Usually
wherever.
it's a one time and then you never do it again.
Yeah, I was doing a consulting gig in Kansas City, and if you're in real estate, you can kind of figure out who's in Kansas City, St. Louis. But anyway, I'm getting on the airplane, and I was like, am I on a Greyhound bus, or am I on a city transit, or I'm on an airplane? Because it literally, you feel like you're inside of a bus.
Yeah.
And
I've never been on one.
My
mom's a travel agent, so I think she's always steered me
Right.
clear of those.
So I do have another quick question for you, and this
Yeah.
was a buddy of mine was asking this the other day. What does a good agent or realtor broker do for their client? Because again, in this modern era, other than getting on MLS, what are they doing? I mean, is it the negotiation? Why am I paying somebody 3-6% to offload a property?
There's a lot that goes into that. So for one, having access to the MLS,
Right.
is a big tool between a non-agent or an agent. A good agent is probably networked pretty well. People recognize good agents. When you asked me to come on here and I said, what are we going to talk about? And you said ethics, that was cool for me to know that people recognize me as, hey, you're about ethics. Mm-hmm. I think that's important. Having an agent that represents you, having an agent that is ethical, that's not going to get you sued down the road. And that networked aspect, when other agents respect your agent, it's going to go a lot further in getting contracts accepted. Because if I have a multiple offer situation and I get 10 offers from 10 different agents, and maybe I know 5 of them and I know 3 of them, or maybe an NW and
NW squared?
and I get a contract.
We can say that, right? NW squared?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I get a contract from certain people, but I get a contract or maybe a couple from these 2 agents that I know are going to do a very good job. I know they know what they're doing. They're going to get us to closing. They've already got their client pre-approved, all that kind of stuff. I'm probably going to steer my client towards them. Obviously it's up to the seller to decide, but I'm probably going to say, hey, these people are not that great. You can accept it. There's a good chance it won't close. Mm-hmm. But these people I know are professionals, and they're going to get us to closing. They're going to ensure that this is smooth. I've worked with them before, and I would recommend considering these over the other ones. It's still in the seller's best interest if I'm telling them that. Even if it's a little bit less, money to them, they're going to see that on paper because we have Excel sheets that break down the exact net that every single contract's going to bring them. It's color coded and stuff. So they're going to see, okay, well, this one's going to net me more, but you're saying this one's going to be smoother. People want smooth. People will pay extra for that.
Right.
So I think that's important, having an agent that has relationships with people and that they trust in the industry. You're kind of paying for that.
Right.
Yeah, can you pay John Smith 1% to do this job. Yeah, you could, but it might be better to pay 3% to Chris Ohlig that knows a lot of people and can get your house sold probably much quicker for more money and much smoother process.
So here's a two-part question for you. What about investors working with realtors and investors, or realtors working with investors? Like, how do you see that? Like, is 99.9% of your brokerage dependent on the general public, or do you have, do any of your agents, realtors, do they work with investors? Is it a lost cause? Is it something worth pursuing? How can investors benefit? And I know I said a two-part question and I just started going everywhere.
Yeah.
But you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, so I'd say, well, the way I look at any purchase is it's an investment. It could be a good investment or a bad investment, but it's still an investment. So people always ask, do you work with investors? Yeah, any buyer we work with is an investor. They're investing in something. You're talking probably about people that invest in multiple properties, professionally. I'd say most of our agents, if not all of them, work with investors. We like them. You know, you're marketing to one person 10 times versus 10 people one time. You know, they're doing more transactions. It's better for someone's time. They've already built a relationship. They know exactly what that person wants. At some point, you can discount services. You know, I have investors that I personally represent that, you know, we've sold 10 plus homes for them. So the next 5 we'll do at a discount because it's seamless. Like, we use the same title companies for everything.
Right.
You know, there's not a whole lot of legwork involved. I know exactly what they want. They know how I work. We're not having to rebuild things every time. So I think your question was, do our agents work with them?
Well,
yeah,
do they,
absolutely.
and what's the benefit for the investor? And then conversely, because I know, not conversely, but on the other side, I know maybe some agents view investors as a waste of time. Maybe they're too aggressive, maybe they're too needy. But again, it goes back to that whole volume versus that one-off.
Yeah, so I mean, are investors needy? I don't think they're any more needy than that first-time home buyer that doesn't know what they're looking for and that's going to drive you all over town. I'd rather an investor that knows what they're looking for and can say, you know, I need this ARV, I need this in this location, it has to meet this criteria. That's sometimes easier than the first-time home buyer that says, I need to be under this price point. I'm moving here from out of state. I don't know where I need to be. You know, you have to pick and choose your battles. And
I think needy was the wrong word. Maybe more demanding. Because if I'm like, if I list a property with you, I'm like, it's been 3 days. Why haven't it sold yet?
Yeah.
You know, and I know sometimes that it, depending on the market, that it goes, and sometimes it makes sense or it works. Again, I appreciate that you come in.
Yeah, thank you.
If you liked what you saw, please like it, please share it. Let's get this video out to the masses, as many people as can watch it. If people want to do business with you or any of your agents, how do they get a hold of you?
They can't. I'm impossible to get a hold of.
Sweet. His cell phone number is...
Yeah. I'm actually really easy to get a hold of. I'm on social media all the time. You can probably identify me walking down the street with the long-haired guy. No, you can call our office, 972. Can I give the number?
Absolutely. This is your chance to shine.
Okay.
This is your reward for being with us this morning.
Oh, well, thank you. The real reward was just getting to spend an hour with you.
Obviously.
Right? No, you can call our office, 972-532-6336. You can find us on pretty much any social media account, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Instagram's new, so there's not a lot of content on there. And then you can find us online at ohliggroup.com.
And as far as, because I'm assuming most of the people watching are most likely to be investors, you do business with investors.
Absolutely.
All of your agents, all your realtors are, now that I know there's a difference between agents and realtors, are actively doing business for realtors or their investors.
Yeah, and they're not all up to speed on everything that's involved. You know, we have a couple agents that are definitely, you know, well versed in working with investors. Some are newer and they're still learning the ropes. You know, if they pick up an investor, that's fine. We're probably not going to give it to them right away. They have to kind of earn those because those are what we would consider a lay down deal. Right. You know, there's a little bit of work involved, but they're a little bit easier to close.
So final message to either your agents back in your office or other agents, realtors out there in the ethos, or not ethos, in the world, like what would you like to tell people about ethics, final word on ethics, final word on the real estate industry as a whole?
If you're doing things right, please keep doing that and encourage your peers to do that. Even if it's not necessarily going to make you the most money, it's going to be the most rewarding down the road. If you're not doing things right, maybe you don't know it, and maybe you do know it. But if you're not doing things right, make an effort to do it. Make an effort to learn the laws. And again, just because it's legal, it doesn't mean it's right. You know, you decide whether it's ethical or not. But if you can, just keep being the good guy, because in this day and age, we need more good guys,
Right.
or girls.
And on that, if you feel like you're being a poo-poo head, you probably are a poo-poo head.
Yeah.
So stop being a poo-poo head.
Yeah.
Thanks again for coming
Thank
in.
you. Yeah.
If you need access to MLS comps, check out Propelio.com. If you are looking for off-market leads, Propelio.com does sell that. Again, thank you again for watching this video, hanging out with us this morning. Check us out, Propelio.com. Give us a like, give us a share, and we'll see you next time.